Hi, my name is Jonathan Fleich. I am the creator of Weavlings in the Wilds, published by Atomic Automaton. Today I'm going to teach you how to use all the traps for the base game and the expansion pack, Zadarra's Baubles and Brews. If you haven't seen our How to Play video, I'd recommend watching that first. You can find a link to that right over here somewhere. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. If you want to use the Ol Switcheroo, you'll play it from your hand. Then you can select two non-BC cards to swap. We are swapping the Wild Spirit and the Ol Switcheroo. That will not cost an action. Or if we wanted to try something different, we can swap a BC card, so this Caraxical, and a non-BC card, the Weavlings, and that would cost an action. Or if you wanted to swap two BC cards, you can swap these two Caraxicals, like so. That would cost an action as well. And then we would put the Ol Switcheroo into the banished pile, and that's how you use the Ol Switcheroo. If you wanted to use the clamp trap, you'd play it from your hand. Then you would select a space on the Tender Wilds to place it. If you play the clamp trap on a non-beastie space, it will remain there and will not cost an action. One interesting thing to note about the clamp trap is it will not shift downwards. The card is fixed to its space. Let's say our trapper here wanted to collect this Wild Spirit. They would collect it, and then you would collapse the Tender Wilds as normal. The clamp trap will remain, and the Wild Spirit will collapse. We would then replenish the Tender Wilds since the played trap is considered an empty space. You can place the unrevealed card underneath, just so we can see, and that's what fixed means. Let's rewind a little bit here and try something different. If we play the clamp trap on a beastie space, we can collect that beastie immediately as meat. This would cost an action. This exhausts the clamp trap and we'll place it in the banished pile. The Tender Wilds will collapse and replenish as normal. If you wanted to use the Poison Poppet, you'd play it from your hand. Then you would select a space on the Tender Wilds to place it. During the beastie's feed phase, if the beasties are able to target the Poison Poppet with their chomp icons, they will do so. They will also ignore any Weavlings they could target. So we're in the beastie's feed phase. The beasties will feed from lowest to highest. We have a 5 speed here, so this beastie will go first. It's able to chomp on this Poison Poppet. It's also able to chomp on this Weavling here. It will ignore the Weavling because it's targeting the Poison Poppet. It will chomp on the Poison Poppet, and you'll collect this beastie as meat. You'll collapse and replenish as normal, and then you'll move to the next beastie. We see this 6 beastie, but there is no effect since there is no Weavling to chomp on, and the Poison Poppet is out of range. If we move to the 8 speed beastie, we see this Caraxical is able to chomp on the Poison Poppet. We would collect this Caraxical as meat, and collapse and replenish the Tender Wilds as normal. We will move to our last beastie. This Vargler is able to chomp on the Poison Poppet. It's also able to chomp on this Weavling here. It will ignore the Weavling and only chomp on the Poison Poppet. We'll collect the Vargler as meat, collapse and replenish the Tender Wilds as normal. Now that the beastie's feed phase is complete, the Poison Poppet is exhausted and is moved to the banished pile. If you wanted to use the Weavling Aroma, you'd play it from your hand. Then you would select a beastie to target. The beastie we will target is this Caraxical here. So what the Weavling Aroma does is it allows the beastie to attack other beasties as though they are Weavlings. So in this case, it will chomp this Vargler. We would collect it as meat, collapse and replenish the Tender Wilds as normal. It would also chomp on this Vargler. We will collect the beastie as meat, collapse and replenish as normal. These actions are simultaneous. If a beastie were to collapse into the chomp icon space, the Caraxical will not chomp again. You can always wait to collapse and replenish to avoid confusion. Once the Caraxical has fed, Weavling Aroma will no longer have an effect, but the Caraxical will not feed again during the beastie's feed phase. To notate that, you can place the Weavling Aroma under the Caraxical. Like previously mentioned, the Caraxical will not feed on the Weavling during the beastie's feed phase, even though it would typically be able to do so. Once the turn is over, you can put the Weavling Aroma in the banished pile. If you wanted to use the Wilds Wrecker, you play it from your hand. Then you would select a row you'd like to target. In this case, we'll target this row, which will allow us to collect all these beasties as meat. One interesting thing to note about the Wilds Wrecker is it allows us to target unrevealed cards. What you would do is reveal the unrevealed card and resolve the card accordingly. For this Wild Spirit, we would place it in the discard pile. We would then collapse the Tender Wilds and replenish as normal. If you wanted to use the rolling logs, you'd play it from your hand. Then you would select a column you'd like to target. In this case, we'll target this column, which will allow us to collect all these beasties as meat. One interesting thing to note about the rolling logs is it allows us to target unrevealed cards. What you would do is reveal the unrevealed card and resolve that accordingly. For this Wild Spirit, we would place it in the discard pile. We would then collapse the Tender Wilds and replenish as normal. Rolling logs will be placed in the banish pile. If you wanted to use the Transposition Talisman, you'd play it from your hand. You would then select a card from the discard pile and a card from the banish pile, and you would exchange them. You would then place the Transposition Talisman in the banish pile, and that's it. If you wanted to use the Idol of Second Sight, you'd play it from your hand. Then you would predict the next card in the Wilds deck. Let's say we predict an event, we would draw, and yep, I was right. So the event will be banished. The Idol of Second Sight will be placed in the banish pile. If you wanted to use the Column Shaker Potion, you'd play it from your hand. Then you would rearrange any of the cards in a single column. Let's say we wanted to rearrange this column, for example. We can move this card here, and this here. This will exhaust the Column Shaker Potion, and we will place it in the banished pile. If you wanted to use the Okaibi Scarecrow, you play it from your hand. Then you would rearrange any of the cards in a single row. Let's say we wanted to rearrange this row. We can move this here, and this here. This will exhaust the Okaibi Scarecrow, and it will be placed in the banish pile. If you wanted to use the Diagnolis Draught, you'd play it from your hand. Then select a target on the Tender Wilds. Let's select this Weavling, for example. The Diagnolis Draught will then affect all cards diagonally in respect to the target we selected. We would collect these beasties as meat. This will exhaust the Diagnolis Draught, and we will place it in the banish pile. The Weavling is unaffected, and will collapse and replenish as normal. If you wanted to use the Orthogonate Elixir, you'd play it from your hand. Then we'd select a target on the Tender Wilds. Let's select this Weavling, for example. The Orthogonate Elixir will then affect all cards orthogonally in respect to the target we selected. We would collect these beasties as meat. This will exhaust the Orthogonate Elixir, and we will place it in the banished pile. The Weavling is unaffected and will collapse and replenish as normal.